All right, I'm going to start with a couple announcements. If anybody got a book and you're going to read the book, make sure to look at the back pages where it has maps and name charts, because sometimes I don't describe which names are who, and the names actually change through cultures, and sometimes in the same culture you can give somebody 3 or 4 names, and so they do, and so they make the correlations for you. So if you're using their ideas about the correlations, then sometimes you can have 4 or 5 names just for one guy, and so consult the back a lot as you go through it. Another thing, I'm not saying in this speech that paganism confirms the Bible. What I'm saying in this is that we had paganism at the beginning, and our cultures came out of paganism largely. And if you read the book, it talks about how I think that originally it was paganism, and then it moved on from what we had then, and then Christianity took over. But Christianity was there the whole time through Judaism. Judaism was there at the beginning too. It's just the other nations were not faithful to God. And so you can't trust all the histories back then. You do have to cherry pick some of them. You have to say, this guy seems a little more reliable than this guy, and this guy says this about such and such. And so you do have to take into consideration the reliability of your sources, and some of them just aren't reliable in regard to paganism. And some of them are a little more reliable. Some of them, like the scriptures, are excessively and extremely reliable.
What do you think it's going to take for truth and reality to enter academia?
I think it's just like with Abram and Terah. I think that they're not going to bend. I think that it's going to be like this until the end, unless there's some major revival and God actually takes care of business. I don't think that they're going to listen a lot of times. There's enough out there to prove everything beyond doubt, and I've read so much about the truth of a young earth, and it's just it's undeniable, and they deny it anyway. And they get angry and red in the face when they deny it. And I don't see it happening unless God does something in their heart, because it's more an issue of what you choose to accept for evidence, and how your equations work are what variables you put in your equations, and what numbers you give to your variables. And if you're given the wrong numbers, you're going to come up with the wrong answer.
I didn't catch if you talked about it in your presentation, but do you have like a Nephilim connection to these ancient mythological people?
I don't really delve into that very much. Some of the ancient writers, if you read them, some of the sources actually do talk about Nephilim a little bit, but they don't really go very deep. And I'm sure that if you just read a paper on Nephilim, you'd find out more than I have to tell you.
Alexander Hislop links Nimrod and his wife to the whole pantheon.
Yeah.
I wondered if Jasher, when you were reading Jasher, did they say anything about Nimrod and Samaria?
It says a lot about Nimrod and Jasher. I think some of the reason why paganism spread so far is because there were a couple of kings that were sons of Ham that took over in different places. Like in Europe, there was a pagan king that basically changed religion. And then there was also Nimrod, who was in Asia. So you have these sons of Ham who were ruling in Europe and Asia when they shouldn't have been there. According to Jasher, he said that they agreed to stay in Africa and called curses upon themselves for coming out of Africa. But then they ran a big old circuit around Europe, one of them. That's what Hercules is famous for, because he was a great-grandson of Ham. And then Nimrod took over all of Asia when he shouldn't have been there. He was, you could read in the scriptures itself, he was descended from Ham too.
It was so fascinating because Tarsus was actually a university town where Paul comes from, and it was really where Mithras, the the mystery religion that all the Roman army worshipped actually came and started in Tarsus.
Yeah.
Really amazing. That just blew me away. Paul isn't talking like that.
Yeah. I think most of the paganism is related, and that the first gods were all the same for every culture. They just called them different names, and then they started changing who they were. I mean, Uranus was probably Noah because he was the first god in the pantheon, and the gods were just basically deified kings. And as you go through it, you got all the first gods were basically the same through all the cultures.
How did the names of the planets come into this?
I don't know the origin of it, but I know that they are gods. That's what I know. As I said, I'm not really an expert. I've read a little bit more than average on this stuff. Oh, and you'll find that the people that don't accept this basically throw all of mythology out and don't accept any of it as true. And it was just a stupid religion that early man was stupider than us, and so they were stupid, and so they just followed all these deities for no reason at all. And so I don't think that about early man. I think early man had to be at least as smart as us because, we have the same genetic code, right? And if you have inheritance of intelligence at all, which you'd have to assume if, apes have the same intelligence and humans have the same intelligence, you have to assume that humans, if they came from apes, you have to assume that it's inherited. So I don't believe that we came from apes at all, if that's what I was saying. What was I saying? That
Smart.
Yeah, they're smart.